Steam railways have always represented the epitome of railways in their heyday. The 12.5 miles on the East Lancashire Railway gives steam a great chance to show their mettle with inclines over the Metrolink, up the Broadfield bank to Haywood and northwards to Ramsbottom and Rawtenstall. The retention of the old steam sheds at Buckley Wells also preserves the steamy atmosphere of these wonderful engines at rest and in preparation. 2007 is the 20th anniversary of passenger services from Bury to Ramsbottom on the E.L.R, which was celebrated with style earlier this year. The major steam events in January, June and October were attended by locomotives representing the four main pre-grouping companies of the London, Midland and Scottish Railway, the Great Western Railway, the Southern Railway and of course the London and North Eastern Railway. And that's not to forget the significant classes of locomotives that represent the post-grouping British Railways. In May 2007, our 1940s wartime weekend gave us four of the finest steam engines that would actually have operated through the wartime period. And of course the mainline connection at Castleton allows the East Lancashire Railway to act as a servicing base for the many of the steam locomotives that travel the country on the national network. Our cameras have been able to capture steam on the main line at locations around Manchester and up and down the East Lancashire Railway. And so, without further ado, let's head forward to part 1 of Steam on the East Lancashire Railway between January 2007 and November 2007. With our newly ensconced tankers in the sidings at Ramsbottom, our January steam event takes off. The first train of the day was the Black 5 Lancashire Fusilier, which in the rather dark, dull surroundings had actually been part of a photo charter down at Burrs. Here he is, arriving in the sidings, ready to shunt the freight. With the freight shunted, 850 Lord Nelson on its first run northwards out of Bury. The Black 5 heads southwards, in the station of 5690 Leander, having headed northward with the first shuttle of the day. Leander runs round the carriages, ready to take the shuttle southbound to Bury. We then head to Nuttall Tunnel and a northbound Princess Elizabeth. Ian Riley brings 850 southbound, and I'm sure the directors whose effigies are on the north portal of Nuttall Tunnel would never have expected to see such a magnificent locomotive on this line. Somerset and Lancashire Fusilier is seen slowly into the station on the shuttle. Our Black 5 is followed by this rather unusual double header. The 9F had left the 4F in Ramsbottom and the Black 5 double heads back. Olive sidings and a northbound 6201. Framed by the wintry trees, a southbound Lord Nelson. Our Black 5 pilots the 9F and is seen spectacularly through Touch Hill Cutting. The 9F went forward alone and 45407 light engine south for Bury, ready for our next northbound doubleheader. And spectacular it is indeed. As Lord Nelson heads northbound, our next southbound sees the Ginty double heading with the Black 5. The Ginty had been on footplate experience at Rottenstall. Our Black 5 returns to Bury Bolton Street. And on arrival at the station sees 6201 ready with a northbound train. Bury South, and a wonderful assemblage of Stannia's locomotives. Our freight is then northbound through the station, Lord Nelson platform 4 and the 9F in platform 2.
What's going on here? How many have you got in there?
On arrival, and our Black 5 shunts the stock. On return to the sidings, the 4F is seen shunting the guards van. And as we start to head south, 6201 is seen passing us in the sidings.
Five's coming down with the 9. Hey Simon!
Our final freight of the day was to be double-headed Black 5 and 4F. Ready to be coupled up, and we're just waiting for a northbound 92214. We were stopped just outside Castlecroft and the Black 5 detaches, ready to take another passenger train forward. Our 4F passes through platform 4 and we can see the double-heading Black 5s ready to head northwards. And I'm sure you'll agree this has been a spectacular January steam event here on the E.L.R. A visit to the steam sheds at Bury is always very interesting. 825, the Southern Region 460, is seen outside the sheds. Connecting rods missing, it was due off its wheels for retiring. Meanwhile, inside the shed, ready for major overhaul, Ian Riley's Standard 4 is 76079. Behind our cab roof is the tender for the recently acquired 44871. And inside the sheds we can see Black 5 at 45407 is having the cylinders reamed. A Great Western chassis, obviously. And to the side of it was the stripped down boiler for Ian Riley's Standard 4. And a chance to take a look at some of the work that needs to be undertaken on the foundation ring. The tender itself was also in for servicing, and just in front of it, yet another chassis, and in front of that, 44871 itself. Let's hope that we can see this Black 5 up and running for the 40th anniversary of the end of steam on British Railways. That's in August next year. And Chris Beat and his current project, that of the Yates and Duxbury's 040 Peckett, sharing the same line as the main line Lord Nelson. The Duke of Gloucester was really close to heading back onto the main line, and we will indeed see it in our March event. And so without further ado, let's head back to March and 850 heading up the Broadfield Bank. Our camera leapfrogs forward to the Pilsworth Industrial Estate and 850 on the climb. Our engine is seen then, westbound over the River Roch. And our next northbound, a very active 5690 Leander. And our Jubilee is seen westbound chasing the Pigeon Post. And our next northbound is none other than the magnificent 6201 Princess Elizabeth. And our cameras leapfrog again to the Pilsworth Industrial Estate. Westbound at the old Pilsworth Quarry. 92214 up the bank. With some dark looking clouds, we were quite fortunate that the rain held off to see our next westbound, Black 5 and Jubilee. And for one of its first outings in a long time, 71000 up the bank. And our Phoenix is seen down the hill westbound towards the River Roch and onward to Bury Bolton Streets. Overlooking the River Roch towards Bury, we see our duo double heading towards Haywood. and we pass on to Sunday and Summerseat Station. 45231, just acting as the photo charter that morning, is standing by at Summerseat, waiting for the photographers to take their place and get a shot over the viaduct over the River Irwell. Having run round its stock and run back into Ramsbottom Station, 45231 awaits the arrival of the 9F with the Ginty on the rear.
Hiya!
With our Black 5 waiting to run the freight down into the yards, 850 sneaks past into platform 3. And on our way down to the yards, we were able to see Leander and Princess Elizabeth awaiting their turn on passenger services. Safely detached in our newly constructed Carillion yard, 45231 heads back to Bury Bolton Street, ready to take on some more carriages. and with it absolutely teeming down, 71000 heads northwards to Rawtenstall. March the 31st is LMS Theme Day, and entering Ramsbottom Station we can see the signals were non-operational. This was because of the works that were being undertaken to make the crossing here operational. And entering the station, none other than 45231 and 5690. And as we can see behind the two locos, the canopy is nearing completion. And making a very impressive turn over Burrs, the Ginty and the 4F. And was certainly not to be outdone by the following duo. And our duo return double-headed, ready to take on the ski jump and head into Bury. And a very, very impressive sight they make indeed. And I'm sure you'll agree that was a magnificent LMS theme day. Onward to the 9th of May. There were just 2 engines running that day, 5690 Leander and 71000 the Duke of Gloucester. Let's just stop and take a look. The Duke is captured eastbound at the bottom of the Broadfield Bank and again on arrival at Haywood. And to enhance our feel of the steam era, Haywood Station had got some new BR looking signs. Very impressive indeed. And back on shed in May 2007 we can see the huge amount of work that's gone into preparing 76079 for mainline operation. Let's just take a look at this wonderful engineering undertaken by Ian Riley and many of his employees here in Riley Engineering. Sadly, an old friend was up for sale. And as we can see, progress had been made on the tender for 44871. Chris Beat's Peckett was stripped down, it had been painted up and was ready to be put back together again. This gave us the unique opportunity to take a look between the rails, just to see the bits and pieces that are going to make this locomotive special indeed. and Chris and the team were undertaking some further works on the firebox of our packet. Standing next door to the packet firebox are the frames and tenders for 45337 and 42769, both of which the boilers are away for repairs. 92214 receives some attention, and next to the doorway in the sheds, the return of Thomas the Tank, the old Manchester Ship Canal 060. 6201 had done a mainline visit and was being prepared to leave again. At the end of our steam sheds are the old railway offices, and Bury Council have secured a whole lot of money to help repair this obviously somewhat under-maintained building so that we could use it in the future for the offices of the East Lancashire Railway. As we'll see through our DVD here, and later on in the year, you'll be able to see the vast amount of advance that's been made on putting the new floors into these old offices. Once again, this is another aspect of preservation in action. The late May Bank holiday and our 1940s wartime weekend. We were fortunate enough to have 4 locomotives that would have witnessed the war. Our first, the Jubilee Leander 5690, our wonderful 1940s reenactment people, and a superbly preserved LMS Crimson Lake 5690. And southbound at Ramsbottom at that very moment, another Crimson Lake LMS locomotive 6201 Princess Elizabeth. Not shortly after our locomotives crossed paths, we also were able to witness some superb views of the Lancaster as it flew down the Irwell Valley over Ramsbottom. And in between our passenger services you could see a display of freight shunting, and of course nothing better than our freight locomotive, the Ginty. Further up the line at Irwell Vale we're able to capture a renamed station, E.L.R, which was a reenactment of the capturing of some of the French territories. At the station, in an ex-German halt, we can see a southbound Great Western locomotive, 3440, the City of Truro. And finally, returning to Ramsbottom, we can see the city of Truro running round its stock on the last train of the day. And I'm sure you'll agree that was a really authentic 1940s wartime weekend. Burrs and our June steam event, and our first northbound, our double heading LMS Black 5 and Jubilee. Closely followed by a southbound 062 tank 5643, double heading with the city of Truro. And round the corner at Olive Sidings, our next northbound is the first passenger run of 76079. Our standard 4 non-stop through Somerset. Our Great Western Freight is seen northbound over Brooks Bottom Viaduct. City of Truro. Our Black 5 is followed by the returning freight. And oddly enough, our next northbound passenger is hauled by the 062 freight tank 5643. And as Leander heads northbound, our next southbound is 2 freight engines. The Ginty had been on at Rawtenstall for footplate experience and is double heading with the 062 Great Western tank. Ian Riley's 2 locomotives across Burrs. Onward to the Sunday, and our standard 4 had been on the photo charter. It headed forward to Ramsbottom and deposited our war vehicle in the head shunt, ready to be unloaded by its owner. In the meantime, 5690 northbound. And on arrival at Bury Bolton Street, our freight sees the Black 5 ready to head northbound with a passenger and the Great Western tank in platform 4. On return, the Black 5 heads for Haywood. Our standard 4 was heading off to take the passenger to Haywood and is seen by return round the curves at Bury South. Our freight leapfrogged it into the sidings, and 76079 is seen northbound to Rottenstall. And our view from the freight as we head back into Bury Bolton Street looks something like this. And on our way back to Ramsbottom, the Standard 4 is in Platform 4. And as the Standard 4 disappears round the corner, let's take 5 minutes to have a look at our 062 tank on a freight. On arrival back at Bolton Street, the heavens opened up. And our Jubilee Leander heads back into Platform 3, ready to take the next and our final shot of the passenger train northwards.